Throughout class so far, we've been using a few words like methods and messages and objects, and we've tried to say that you can send messages to objects, and that's the same thing as calling the method of an object, and we want to understand what all these things mean. So, we're going to start by reviewing a few of these examples. The first thing we need to do is look at the keyboard reader class, and so at the top of your file, you're going to need to import the keyboard reader class. That is, import keyboard reader. And keyboard reader is part of the terminal IO package. So you have to type terminalio.keyboardreader, just like this. Once you have that line in, you can press compile, and it'll give you a warning probably because you did not use what you imported. And with my compiler right now, JDK 7.02, it was fine. Let's try the Eclipse compiler. And notice this is not an error, it is just a warning, and that's fine. All it's saying is that you never used what you imported, which, again, not an error. So, inside of my main method, I'm going to actually create a keyboard reader, and this is creating an object, or we say instantiating an object. So I'm going to type keyboard reader, and I'm going to call this one reader, just like we have in the past, although I could call it anything else. I could call it input taker. You know, you could come up with some other name that sort of makes sense, but reader's a good one, so equals new keyboard reader. And as soon as I've done that, I've instantiated it. Again, I like pressing compile quite a bit, just because it helps me figure out if I've made any mistake. Now again, it's giving me a warning, it's not an error, it's just saying that I never actually used this variable that I called reader. I have never used it, but let's use it. So, I'm going to say in this next line, I'm going to make a string, like we did in the last lesson, and I'm going to call this string name, and I'm going to set it equal to reader.readLine. Now we haven't used readLine necessarily before, unless you were doing something fancy. We used readDouble. ReadLine and readDouble are both methods of the keyboard reader class. Now, my object is named reader, and what I'm really doing is I'm sending a message, and the name of that message is readLine, to the reader object. Now, I have these parentheses, just in case I wanted to give a little special hint or some special information to the reader object about what it should do with that message. But that's empty for now, and you'll see an example of when it's not empty in a little bit. And I'm going to finally print out the result. System.out.println, and I'm just going to print out name, compile, and run your program. And it should pop up a nice box for you. Let you type in whatever name you want. So I'm going to Geronimo. Geronimo gets printed out to the standard output, just like that. And I'm going to, from here, start talking about different methods we can use. That's a method, but we also used a method right here. You can think of system.out as being an object, and it knew what to do when you sent it that message. Now notice, inside the parentheses, you sent it what we call a parameter. Parameters are sent as part of a message to an object to help that object know what to do in its method. And this is actually usually something you have to do. We saw another example of this in a different program. It didn't use the terminal IO package, it used import Turtle Graphics and standard pen. So we had to create a standard pen, and again, we instantiated a variable. I'm going to do that on the line after keyboard reader. I'm going to do standard pen. I'm just going to call it pen, nice and simple, equals new standard pen. Alright. Now, with this, it's a little bit different, and I'm going to comment out these lines of code, so we're not dealing with them right now. And I'm actually going to comment out that line as well. That way the compiler will ignore them. And I'm going to use this pen now to draw something. So the pen starts in the down position, that is, it's touching the paper for us, and I'm going to give it a few messages. So pen.move is the first message we can send it, but if I just say pen.move and I don't put anything in my parentheses, and I try to compile my program, it gives me an error. Notice this is an error, not just a hint that we didn't do something. This is an actual error. It did not compile. The method move, and notice it says double in parentheses, in the type turtlegraphics.abstractpen is not applicable for the arguments, and then it just has parentheses with nothing inside like I had it. Well, the point is that the method move, it expects a double, and I have to give it a double, so I'll give it a double, 25.3. And let's compile and see what happens. the pen, starting in the very center of the window, it moved straight upwards 25.3. I'm going to do this again, but I'm going to pass it a different double. So instead of the parameter 25.3, I'm going to pass it a different parameter. I'm going to do 5.3 and run it again, and you can probably predict what's going to happen. It's going to be a shorter line, just like this. There are other messages we can send to the pen object. Instead of move, I could also send turn. You have to pass it a parameter. If I compile, it will give me an error. And so I have to give this one a double as well. Notice it's telling me it needs a double. And I'll turn this, because it's degrees, 90 degrees. It turns counterclockwise, it turns to the left. And just so we can see the effects of this, I'm going to do pen.move, and I'll have it move 10. So it's going to move up 5.3, it's going to turn to the left a full 90 degrees, and then it's going to move 10 in that direction as well. You can predict in your head what this is going to look like, and we'll see for real right here. So again, it started here at the bottom, moved up, and then over. Okay, the whole point of this, again, is this is just method practice. We're practicing calling these methods. Another way to say that is we're sending messages to the pen object, and each message has the name of the method. In the last lesson, we saw an example of a string, and so I'm going to actually delete all of this, and I'm going to show you an example where I create a string. I'm going to call it cowabunga, personal favorite word, equals, let's go with, man, I love being a turtle. Alright, oh, forgot to have my semicolon at the end of that statement, and here I am going to use a method we saw before, and I'm going to do the system.out.println statement, and I'll print out cowabunga. Okay, so you can expect what's going to happen here. It's just going to print out that line. It says, man, I love being a turtle, and that's it. Let's try cowabunga.length, because strings are also objects, so you can send them messages. Length is a message that the cowabunga object knows of because it's a string, and when I do this, it returns, spell that correctly, there we go, it returns 27. And now I'm not quite sure why it's printing that out just like that, because I did system.out.print instead of system.out.println. There we go, compile again, and run, and it prints out nice like that, 27. Good. Now if I counted these, I would actually be able to count 27 characters here in that string. Okay, point being, that's the method, that's how we call it. So, in review, all objects have messages that they know what to do with, because those messages correspond to the methods of the object. And methods sometimes require extra information, and we call that a parameter, and some actually require more than one parameter. So far we've only seen ones that required one parameter, such as in the Turtle Graphics standard pen, you had to, if you wanted to tell it to move, you had to tell it how far to move, and so we had to pass a double as the parameter. Here, with the cowabunga, we did not. It's a length message, or the length method does not expect us to pass it any value, so we just do open and close parentheses like this. As you encounter new objects in this class, be on the lookout for the different messages you can pass to objects of that type.